Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. I've been looking back over the systems I've owned over the years and seeing if I can nail down my 10 favourite games for each of them. And now it's time for the Game Boy Advance. I remember buying this from my local Game, and yep, the shop is just called Game in case you live outside the UK, and it was a magical day. Though sadly not many of my friends got involved with the Game Boy Advance scene, so I was mostly left to my own devices. But still, it is a great handheld and I had some really fun games for it. I would like to once again remind everyone that these are my favourite games for the system. I'm not saying they're the best ones on the system. In fact, I'm not even saying they're very good games. And I didn't actually own a lot of what are now considered the best ones on the system. So if your favourite isn't here, deal with it. So now, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. We might as well start with the game that I got with the system, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. This was the game I took home with me on the day, and I still think it's one of the best for the little handheld. It's a port of the hugely popular console game, and honestly, it's downsized to the smaller system perfectly. For those of you that have been living under a rock and don't know, the Tony Hawk games are arcade-style time trial ones where basically you choose from a selection of real-life pro skaters, and then you're put into a selection of quite large levels. Each level has 10 goals for you to complete. Some of these are the same, like having to reach a high score, collecting the letters that spell skate, or finding a hidden VHS tape. But some are specific to the stage, like having to smash bells in the school, crush boxes in the warehouse, or grind on a helicopter in the hangar. You only have 2 minutes per session, but you don't have to complete all the goals in those 2 minutes, though that is entirely possible when you know what you're doing. What's more likely though is that you'll spend the 2 minutes focusing on one goal at a time, but it's not easy and some can take a good few tries to figure out exactly what the game wants you to do. This is never a problem though, as it's just so damn fun to play. Being a skating game, there's a ton of tricks you can do. These are really easy to pull off. You press B to jump and then A lets you grind, L does flip tricks and R does grab tricks. It's simple and holding different directions does different moves. What you'll need to do is massive trick combos that rack up massive scores, and it's just so much fun that you do spend hours in each level trying to get the high score. Completing goals earns you money, and you can also find money hidden in the levels. This can be used to upgrade the stats of your skater, and what's cool is that you can fully max out everyone here, and you are actually encouraged to play through the game with each of the character to do so. You really won't mind doing this, and by the end you can beat almost every level within the allocated 2 minutes on your first run, and it makes you feel awesome. And if you do that, you can even unlock Spider-Man as a playable character, which is pretty cool. You can also customize your characters and their special tricks. These require special inputs and give massive point bonuses, so it's worth customizing your skater how you want them. Something the Tony Hawk games are known for is their awesome soundtracks. Well, that's probably the only thing that hasn't really been brought across. There's no licensed music here, just some generic rock and rap instrumentals that have quite short loops, but it does fit the game just fine. The graphics are decent, especially for an early game, and the animation is great. Sometimes the perspective can be a bit tricky and it makes it hard to tell exactly where things in relation to you, but you do soon get used to it. Overall, this is a brilliant game that still holds up today and is a must-own for Game Boy Advance collectors or Tony Hawk fans. Another game I got quite early on was Bomberman Tournament. I'd always liked the Bomberman games, but this was the first one I ever owned. I never got to play the multiplayer though, as I don't know anyone else that owned it, but I really had a blast with the single player campaign. You are Bomberman and your mate Max has been captured. Basically your mission is to get him back, but wouldn't you know it, he's been taken by a bunch of your old enemies, so you've got to go across 5 worlds defeating them, getting power-ups and saving Max. Interestingly, the game plays kind of like Zelda-style adventure, with you exploring a large open world filled with monsters, puzzles, towns and even dungeons to complete. I think it works quite well. You explore an overworld and of course you have your bombs as weapons. You use these just like you do in the classic game, dropping them down and waiting for them to explode. You need to time it all very well though, so enemies are in line with the blast when they go off. As you play, you'll learn to drop more and more bombs, as well as making them have a larger blast radius. You have to be careful though, as you can blow yourself up if you're not careful. Also, as you play, you get access to different bomb types. These can be things like remote control bombs, landmines and so on. Interestingly, the game also introduces Carabons. Basically, these are Pokemon, because it was the early 2000s, and I quite like the designs on them. The Carabons aren't captured though, instead you meet them as you play through the story and they'll just ask to join you, sometimes right away or sometimes after you've done something for them. Carabons each have their own abilities and can be equipped, so that ability is active. For example, there's one that gives you a shield you can use, one that lets you push blocks, one that lets you teleport, and so on. Basically, they work as items, but are cute animal things. However, you find tokens when blowing up the scenery. There's a sword, shield, and star. These power up the attack, defense, and special attacks of whatever Carabon that you've got equipped. The reason for this is that you can do Carabon battles, which are a bit like Pokemon battles, so you need to make sure that when you're collecting them, you've got the one that you want to power up equipped. The Carabon battles are pretty simple. You just choose from 3 moves in the list of available ones, and the battle then automatically plays out with those 3 moves. You can attack, defend, or use a special attack. Whoever loses their HP first is the loser. The winner will usually get money or an item of some sort. When you're done fannying around with these battles, you can get back to rescuing Max. Just like Zelda, there's dungeons to explore. These are where the bosses hide, and you'll need to complete puzzles, defeat enemies, and find hidden items and abilities to get through them, just like a Zelda dungeon basically. What's cool is that the dungeons are more like the classic Bomberman games, with blocks and enemies everywhere for you to blow up. It all looks good too, with some nice pixel art. It's certainly not pushing the system, and looks like a Super Nintendo game, but that's not a bad thing. Coming back to it again after about 20 years, I did have a hard time putting it down. It's still really fun, and I recommend it. You never hear anyone talking about it though. How about we get some of the obvious ones out of the way, starting with The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. This is a fantastic Zelda game where the poor princess has been turned to stone by an evil sorcerer, who has also managed to let out the spirits of a bunch of evil bastards. So once again, Link must go on an adventure to set it all back to normal. This time though, he needs the help of the Minish, a race of tiny gnome-like people. Turns out they've been living alongside you and your people this whole time, but you never knew because basically they didn't want you to. But now there's trouble and they're here to help. You find a magic hat that gives you the ability to shrink down to the size of the Minish, and anyone that has followed the channel for a while will likely know that I have a real soft spot for games that have you as a tiny character in a big world, so I love it. So working with the Minish people, you do the usual Zelda stuff. You explore a pretty big world, solving puzzles, collecting items, finding dungeons, solving more puzzles, getting heart pieces, and fighting enemies. What's cool here though is that using the ability to swap between big and small Link at various points to get around the map and solve puzzles. It's a really cool way to introduce new elements to the puzzles, and there's some very unique stuff in here. There's a whole lot more to do in there. You've got various towns that you can visit, and there's usually mini games in them you can take part in to get extra heart containers, or for items that aren't actually required to beat the game, but often come in handy and things like that. You'll also find rupees that you can use to buy various items and stock on ammo if you need it. There's plenty of combat here, and most of the time you'll just be swinging your sword, but there's a few enemies that you'll need to use the items you find in order to expose their weak spot. Classic Zelda. Now you might notice that I'm being a bit vague with this one and not really showing too much exciting footage. That is deliberate, as I'm currently playing through every Zelda game on my Twitch streams every Thursday, and I don't want to play this for too long as I'll be playing through it soon enough. But it is often said that this is one of the easiest and shortest Zelda games, and I do think that's true. However, it doesn't mean it's not an awesome game, because it is. I mean, it's Zelda. So yeah, if you haven't already, get this one, and then follow me on Twitch so you can watch me beat it, along with all the other mainline Zelda games. Mario Kart Super Circuit is my favourite racing game on the Game Boy Advance, though I do have to admit I think it's the only one that I actually owned. But hey, it's Mario Kart. This is the third Mario Kart game in this series, and first for a handheld system. Rather than being based on the N64 one, which was the newest at the time though, this is a lot closer to the Super Nintendo Mario Kart game. You get to pick from 8 characters, and they each have their own stats in terms of speed and weight, which basically affects their acceleration, handling, and also how you react to when crashing into another racer. The light characters will go flying, and sometimes even spin out when they're hitting a larger character. Fun. So you choose who you want to race as, then you select from the various cups, each of which have 4 races that take place in various locations around the Mushroom Kingdom. The final cup will need to be unlocked before you can race on it though. The track variety is pretty damn good actually, seeing you race around proper circuits, around various characters' castles, on beaches, in the clouds, and so on. The tracks do get progressively harder as you progress, with more tight corners and more places to fall off of the track, more obstacles, and so on. As you race, you'll pick up items to use against your opponents. You get shells to fire at them, boos that steal items and make you invisible for a few seconds, the power star that makes you invincible, a boost, banana skins, and so on. You know the drill, it's Mario Kart. You also find coins on the track. These actually increase your top speed, so you do want to get as many as you can. Crashing and being hit by enemies will make you lose coins, so be careful. And there are a finite amount on the tracks, so you might need to play a few times to learn where they all are. The racing action here is really fun. It's not the fastest game out there, but it is certainly challenging on the 150cc difficulty, mainly because the AI racers will always just be right on your tail and you can't afford to crash more than a couple of times, especially on the last lap. Power sliding is essential here, so you want to get used to that so you can take the tight corners and get a bit of a boost out of them. It's just a shame that there isn't much to unlock here. There's no secret characters, however you can unlock the Super Nintendo tracks to race on, which is a nice touch. Graphics wise, it looks good. It's a mix of pixels and digitized sprites and it all works well. And keep in mind, this would be on a tiny screen, even smaller than your phone screen. I was expecting a bit more in the graphics, if I was honest, as it just looks a bit like a Mode 7 game and doesn't really make use of the 32-bit power, especially as the tracks are all just completely flat. Some hills would have been nice. Ah well. It's still a super fun racing game that is easy to pick up and play. Next is Metroid Fusion. As you probably know, Super Metroid is my favourite Super Nintendo game, and it's a toss-up between that and Doom as to what is my favourite game of all time. I got Metroid Fusion the day it was released and I loved it straight away. Just like with Zelda and Mario Kart, I'm sure you really don't need me to tell you much here. The story goes that Samus is infected with a parasite that strips her of her suit and all of its powers. Thankfully there is a cure, so you're sent to a planet where you can get the cure. Annoyingly, one of the samples of the evil parasite has basically turned into an evil version of you though, and it's also parading around on the loose on the planet, and while you've been stripped of your powers, your evil counterpart is fully powered up, so you really hope you better not bump into them. It's kind of like the terrifying first episode of the real Ghostbusters cartoon where the evil versions of the Ghostbusters are knocking around. That is the stuff of nightmares and is still terrifying to this day. Watch it if you haven't seen it. Anyway, as you probably guessed, your mission is to explore a pretty large open world where you'll need to get rid of this pesky parasite and so you can get your powers back and take down the evil you. And it is a pretty large open world, filled with secrets and interconnecting corridors. As you get new abilities, new areas will be available to you, because, you know, Metroidvania. You'll need certain weapons or abilities to open doors, blow up walls, jump high enough to reach ledges, and so on. The game does involve a lot of backtracking and going to old locations to see what you've missed. Though you don't really mind, as it's just so much damn fun to play through, and other than the times it can be a bit annoying when you're stuck and have no idea where you need to go, you will actually be excited to explore old areas to find the hidden weapon power-ups or health and ammo increases. It's great. The game isn't really puzzle based, it's more about having the right item in the right place. At most, you'll have to figure out how to get to the item, but you never have to worry about actual puzzles, really. You do have to worry about an abundance of enemies though, and they all want to eat your face. There's a lot of them just about everywhere, but thankfully you've got some great weapons to fight them with. You've got your arm cannon, but you can also get missiles, bombs, charge shots, freeze rays, spin attacks, and more. These are all fun to use, and some are better against certain enemies than other. When you kill enemies, they'll drop what is essentially another type of parasite thingy. You want to collect these before they fly away, mainly because if you don't, they will find another host to make into an enemy, but also because they'll replenish your health and ammo. You'll find navigation rooms in the game, and there's an AI called Adam that gives you your objectives and marks them on your map, which is handy. You also find save rooms and rooms that replenish your health and ammo. Bosses here are always massive and fun to fight, and almost all of them will give you a new ability when you beat them, which is very nice of them. Controlling Samus is easy and responsive. She's got a few new moves here, like being able to cling onto ledges, as well as climb ladders and on overhead beams. The graphics are great with some excellent pixel art, and I really like the new suit design, as well as the enemies. It's all fantastic. And that just about sums up the game. It is fantastic. I did also have Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of the NES game, but I think Fusion was probably my favourite of the two. Still, both are must-have games. Anyway, we're about halfway through the video now, which means it's time for... That's right, it's time for Comment of the Week, and this week's comment goes to long-time viewer of the channel, Angry Retro Gamer 7313, who commented on my A to Z of GameCube Hidden Gems M to O video. I enjoyed your PlayStation 2 A to Z series so much that it inspired me to buy hundreds of PS2 games. I don't have a GameCube, but I have a Wii that I can play GameCube games on, so maybe this series will inspire me again. Thanks, bros. Well, you're more than welcome, and I hope it does inspire you. And don't forget, if you want to be Comment of the Week next week, put a comment down below. Here is Dragon Ball Advanced Adventure. This is a retelling of the original Dragon Ball saga, with young Goku on his quest to find his Dragon Balls, along with Bulma, Krillin, Yamcha, and all that jazz. In the story mode, you play as Goku and go through a surprising amount of levels in a side-scrolling fashion. For the most part, you just need to go from left to right, fighting a load of enemies along the way, and I have to say, it's really bloody fun. Controlling Goku is easy. You can run, jump, dash, and have a few moves at your disposal. Enemies are all over the place and are mostly easy to deal with. You just need to get up close and hammer the attack button for your usual combo, or you can do jump attacks and get even closer to throw someone. As the game progresses, you get a few special moves. As you have your stick thing, power pole, you do have a few moves you can do with that. By pressing R, you do a special move where you spin it above your head, hitting everyone around you for massive damage. Eventually, you'll learn to do a Kamehameha, which can be done with the L button. And what's cool is that as you play, you earn more ki, which lets you charge it for even bigger blast, for doing even more massive damage. The levels themselves are nice and varied, all recognisable locations from the anime, and you'll be fighting a ton of enemies from the show, mostly Red Ribbon Army soldiers, dinosaurs and robots, and they all look great. The graphics and animation here are fantastic, and they really bring the game to life. The bosses in particular are great, being the main ones from the show, and these are often just one-on-one style affairs where the game goes more like a very basic versus fighter. In these bits you have access to new attacks and specials, and you can block by holding back. Fighting Yamcha, Tien, Jackie Chun and General Tao like this is really cool. Some of the levels are also quite large and do require a bit more exploration, with doors and routes to track down. Also, it's worth exploring anyway, as that's how you'll find the power-ups that give you more health, ki, and a longer range for your power pole. They even throw in auto-scrolling levels, which are a nice distraction, and you even take part in the martial arts tournaments, and they've just done a really great job of recreating the feel of the show in a cool 2D platform game, and I'm all for it. I've actually owned this game since it was released, and I've forgotten how much fun it is. I probably hadn't played it in over about 15 years, and I had a hard time putting it down. This is just a really great platform game that I would recommend to anyone. You don't need to be a Dragon Ball fan to enjoy it, but if you are, you will just get that little bit more out of it. Another must own. Ecks vs Sever is a game that was majorly hyped up before its release, and it's clearly a franchise they wanted to be a global smash. Well, that went well, didn't it? The story here is that there's two assassin people, Ecks and Sever, and they've both been hired to do a similar job but by opposing forces, which of course means they run into each other and try to kill each other. I'll leave you to speculate whether they realise they're both working for the bad guys and team up by the end. You're thrown into various missions in exciting real-life locations like warehouses, regular houses, and the streets, where you'll need to kill bad guys, not civilians, and fulfill a number of objectives like setting off bombs, hacking into computers, and the such. Now, the gameplay here is actually pretty damn good, with some great smooth control that works very well. The levels are relatively open and often packed with enemies who aren't too hard to kill, but they are hit scanners, so if they see you, it is hard not to take damage. The enemies come in a few varieties, but not really, as you can totally see that every enemy is just a reskin of each other, but with a different weapon and hit points. In fact, the enemies don't even drop the weapon they're holding most of the time. You'll kill a guy with a pistol and he'll drop a shotgun, but you can actually tell he has that, because of the sound it makes when they're trying to shoot you. They also have exactly the same animations, which does look a bit daft when you kill a few people in one shot with a shotgun blast or grenade, and they all fall down in exactly the same manner. But hey, it's a cool animation, so I'll get over it. Something I haven't mentioned is the fact that you can choose to play as either Ecks or Sever, and while they do have mostly the same levels, you play each one from their perspective, so you do have different routes to take and objectives to complete. This is a cool thing, and you do come across other characters at certain points, where you have to fight them or sometimes just do a runner. It's not an easy game though, and even the first few levels put up a hell of a challenge, though it is really fun to play. It's a shame that the settings are all quite mundane, as it is hard to get excited about a gunfight in a generic warehouse, but the gameplay and controls are really excellent and it is really still worth playing. I love it. This is one of the best first-person shooter games for the system and still worth checking out. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo Revival is the stupidly named Game Boy entry into everyone's favourite fighting franchise, and when I say everyone, I mean mine. Though no one really talks about the handheld versions, and there might be a good reason for that. Not in this case, however. So anyway, yeah, I'm waffling. It's Street Fighter 2. You get all the characters from the Super Edition, so all the originals and bosses, as well as Cammy, Fei Long, T-Hawk, and everyone's favourite, DJ. You just choose your fighter and then go punch everyone in the face. I mean, it's Street Fighter 2, what do I need to say? But despite having less buttons and a tiny screen, this is a really fun port that I played the hell out of. To get around only having 4 buttons, you now have 2 punch buttons and 2 kick buttons instead of 3 of each. L and R here are your strong attack, with A and B taking care of the weak and medium punch and kicks. Tapping the button does a weak hit and holding it does a medium hit. It actually works really well. Thankfully, the special attacks are very easy to pull off as well and very responsive. You also have super moves here, so you can do the 5-hit fireballs or flash kick combos. Attacking and being attacked builds up your special meter at the bottom of the screen, and when it's full you can do these moves. It is especially satisfying to beat opponents with them. No matter what game mode you play, you will earn points for how well you fight. These points then turn into prizes in the form of unlockables, which are mainly just artwork, so no one really cares. However, there is a hidden character if you get to max out the score. I'll let you guess who that is. It would have been nice to have maybe an alpha character or a few new characters included here, but I don't really mind just having the original lot. I still like to play as pretty much all of them, and I do try to mix it up as much as I can. You won't find me choosing Ryu every time, though I do play as him a lot. The graphics here are decent, they just use the same sprites as they did for the 16-bit versions. I couldn't really see any differences. Though what is a little odd are the character portraits, which look quite out of place and much more anime, and they don't really match the actual sprites, but oh well, minor complaint. I do have to say I'm not a massive fan of the sound here, it's a little crappy, especially as they use the Super Street Fighter announcer who just doesn't get you excited at all. He's also the voice for Guile and just sounds awful, to be honest, with the Sonic Boom attack now just sounding like he's unsure about himself rather than being a devastating move. But still, it's Street Fighter 2. The gameplay here is amazing, and this is a perfect game if you want some fighting on the go. Medal of Honor Infiltrator was a game I took a bit of a gamble on when I bought it because it looked fun on the back of the box, but I didn't know anything about it. But yeah, it's great. You play as a soldier during World War II. You've been dropped behind enemy lines, and you'll never guess what, you've got to do some infiltrating and cause all sorts of mischief. However, this isn't a first-person shooter like I believe every other Medal of Honor game is. Instead, it's a top-down action game, and it works really well. Each level gives you a number of objectives. These usually include blowing things up or finding certain items. You tend to have a main objective and secondary ones. The secondary ones aren't required for completing the missions, but will earn you Medals of Honor that will unlock various other things. You'll need to explore each level, which range from towns and enemy bases to beaches and even more enemy bases. They're all packed with enemy soldiers, tanks, gun turrets and so on. All of these are also pretty deadly. You can only carry 2 weapons at a time, one bullet weapon and one explosive based one, and these are in fixed loadouts. You start each mission with one that is given to you, but throughout the stages you'll find buildings that will either give you a health back or offer you a choice of a different loadout. It is worth trying them all to find your favourite. You get various rifles, assault rifles, machine guns, pistols, shotguns, grenades, pistols, I said pistols already didn't I, bazookas and so on. They each have pros and cons. Some weapons have better range, some have better accuracy, some carry more ammo and so on. You'll soon find the ones that you prefer. It also tends to be the better the primary weapon, the worse the secondary. For example, if you have the bazooka as your secondary weapon, which is probably the best explosive gun going, then you have the pistol as your primary, and the pistol has the worst range and power of all the bullet-based guns. But thankfully you can go back into the buildings as often as you like to swap between the different loadouts. You'll get into a lot of gunfights here, there's enemies everywhere and they can be tough. You don't take a lot of shots to kill, so make sure you use cover when you can, and holding the R button will lock you in one direction so you can strafe. Though be aware you move slower while shooting, so let go of the fire button every now and then. What's cool is that stealth is an option here. You can sneak up on enemies, and you can knock them out silently so other bad guys won't be alerted to your presence. Some missions require this. Sometimes if you're spotted, an alarm will go off, and the screen will lock, and you won't be able to escape until you've killed everyone that appears. Dying can be a pain in the ass as well, because the game is very stingy with checkpoints, and you might have to replay a good 20 minutes of a level. To mix things up, there's also gallery shooter levels, where you just control a crosshair and have unlimited ammo. These levels are fun, and you just have to point at the enemies and press the shoot button until everyone's dead. Usually on these levels, you just have to survive until the timer runs out. It all looks good as well, with some nice sprites and pre-rendered characters. I really like the animation on things, and it is a bit more cartoony, almost reminded me of cannon fodder, which is never a bad thing. This is another game that you don't really hear people talking about, which is a shame as it is great fun. It's a lot harder than it looks, so if you like shooting and a challenge, this is well worth a go. And finally for today, here is Astro Boy the Amiga Factor. It's based on an anime that I've never seen, shock, but the game is from Treasure, and even back then I knew that meant good things. The story is kind of confusing, and honestly you don't really need to worry about it. This is mainly because every level is its own little story, which I believe is an abridged version of the various stories from the anime. Essentially, it's a nice way of being able to include a whole bunch of characters from the series that I'm sure fans will get a kick out of. And honestly, I quite like meeting them all as well. It's an action platform game, and you are Astro Boy. He's a super tough robot dude with guns in his ass. Every level sees you going from left to right, exploring some quite large maze-like levels that are packed with enemies to fight and characters to find. The main thing you'll be doing is fighting. Astro has a few attacks. He can punch and has a decent combo. Pressing down as you attack does a kick. This is handy as it sends enemies flying across the screen and they'll damage anyone else they hit. Pressing up when you attack lets you fire a laser out of your finger that damages anyone it touches. Double tapping the direction lets you boost in that direction and also makes you temporarily invincible. This is essential to get used to so you can dodge enemy attacks. Doing combinations, all of the above, is exactly what you need to do to get through the levels, as you'll be fighting all sorts of strange monsters that come in literally every size and shape. Pretty much everything you kill is a robot, and they all look fun. And they also range from being tiny, just about coming up to your knee, to taking up almost half the screen. And that's not just the bosses. You get regular enemies that take up half the screen as well. This is really cool, but it also looks kinda crappy as they are just scaled up and very pixelated. I remember even at the time thinking it was a bit ropey, though it does have a certain charm to it. As you explore, you'll find a load of other characters hidden in the levels. These all contribute to your Omega Factor, essentially helping Astro be more like a human and showing emotions. So some are good, some are evil, and they each have properties. This is largely irrelevant though, and all that really matters is that when you find a new character, they're added to your database, which gives you an upgrade point to spend. This can be used to increase your health, punch, laser, butt shot, which I forgot to mention. Pressing L makes a gun appear out of your arse and attacks everyone on the screen. Also, pressing R lets you do a massive Kamehameha blast that does massive damage to everyone it hits. Both of these can also be upgraded, as well as your regular finger laser. And all the upgrades have noticeable effects on how you play, so you really want to pay attention to when you die as to why you think you died, so you can upgrade yourself accordingly. I tend to go for health and punch as I like to go in fists swinging. Every now and then you'll get flying stages which play like shooters. These are fun and simple, just shoot everything you see. The bosses here are really great, they all have patterns to learn and can easily get really tough, especially if you haven't been finding characters to upgrade yourself. Something that would have helped though is if the game told you how many people there were in each level to find, as it is easy to miss some and you can't go back to previous levels. And that's my only real complaint, and maybe the slowdown that you get when there's crazy amounts of sprites on the screen, which is quite often. But still, this is a super fun game that didn't make me want to watch the show, but it did make me keep playing until I'd finished. Highly recommended. So there you go, these are my 10 favourite games for the Game Boy Advance. I can only apologise if my list isn't exactly the same as yours, so please tell me what other games I should have included in the comments below. I want to say a big thank you to my sexy patron, and if you want reviews too hot for YouTube, podcasts, gaming challenges and more, then why not check it out? It's only $1 and you can cancel at any time, I won't mind. On screen now, you can see where else you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got loads of great content for everyone to enjoy. And now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.